how do I go from going, say, the educational route to going into industry, whether it be profit or nonprofit?
Being involved with organizations that are made up of people that are not from your background, you know, um, you start to really see that you have a lot of different skills that can be useful.
All right, welcome to, I guess we would call it season 2 of Mentor Talks. We've got a brand new studio, and so does our guest. And our guest is a very special guest today. He's actually our first repeat guest to the show, and was our first guest on the show, and he's so popular. We brought him back. A lot of big things that happened. So hello again to Mr. Keith Ray. How you doing, Keith?
Good. Isaac, how are you, man?
I am doing great. So tell us about, for those people who may not know who you are, let's know who you are, and then let's know what's been happening since the last time we spoke.
Yeah, so my name's Keith Ray. I'm a biologist and formerly at Reinhardt University. So the last time we spoke, I was at Reinhardt University being a biology professor and a lab coordinator and safety guy. And about a year ago now, so we're coming up on a year, I stepped away from all that. I got an amazing opportunity for me to go work with the Southeastern Trust for Parks and Land, and now I am their new director of conservation.
Wow, well, congratulations on that opportunity. That sounds exciting. Tell us a little bit about your new organization and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit land trust, land conservation, park building organization, really multifaceted. So we have about 10,000 acres of land over 3 states, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. And over those 10,000 acres, they're divided up over about 45 different properties. And of all those properties, there's 12 parklands. So that means that they're open for people to use publicly. Our first one was here in Talking Rock near Jasper, where I'm at. So Jasper, Georgia, North Georgia. And the rest are mostly centered around the metro Atlanta area. We have one park that is located north of Mars Hill near Burnsville, North Carolina, on the side of Bald Mountain. And absolutely beautiful property up there called Bald Mountain Nature Park. But we do a lot of different things. And so when we break it down, we focus on 3 major pillars: conservation, recreation, and community. And so when we take a piece of land, if we buy it or if it's given to us, we look at it for its conservation value. What can we do to improve it or sustain it if it's a really good conservation land? We have a lot of recreational uses on those parklands. So walking, hiking, mountain biking is a big thing that we do on a lot of them. So we have several mountain bike focused parks. They're not solely mountain bike parks, but they're mountain bike focused. And we also have bouldering. So that's something new. And we've looked at a lot of other recreational opportunities, but the things that we allow as recreation on our parks are not your typical park recreation things that a lot of people think of. It has to be kind of passive and easy on the land. So we don't go in and build a lot of playgrounds. I mean, we don't have any playgrounds, actually. We don't pave parking lots. You know, we kind of find natural ways to put them in, leave them gravel, porous surfaces. We do a lot of invasive species control for conservation and to help with the park management. So there's a lot of those things that we do. And then the last component, in not least important at all, is the community component. And so we find ways of getting ourselves into communities where parks may not be available traditionally. So one of those is that we've worked really hard to be in is South Fulton, Georgia.
Wow, okay.
So this is the city of South Fulton. We have Campbellton Creek Nature Park there, and it was one of the only parks in that area, and the community has been very supportive of it. We have worked really well with city leaders, and there we developed a much smaller scale mountain biking area, but we've developed bouldering, and we have a community garden there, and it's truly a community garden. We help support the community and what they want to see grown in the community garden, and they can actually just walk in and start picking veggies out of the garden. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You, if you're hungry and you can use it, you go pick it. And it's been an amazing thing to watch happen. And working with all these different community members in places where until very recently it was a food desert. So they love their fresh veggies, and we have people come by and check them every day. They go for a walk, they check them. So the community is very supportive of these kind of things. And we have another park that we're building. It's a little more mountain bike geared. We're going to call it Aerotropolis. Should be opening in just a few weeks. So it's down in that airport corridor. So it's we have properties from every aspect of natural ecology to all different kinds of communities that we serve. So
that's amazing. And there's obvious, you spoke of some of the benefits in terms of the community and, replenishable, resources and things of that nature, and things I wouldn't even thought of in terms of people being able to, grow their own food and those of that nature. What are some other benefits, for bringing parks into these different areas that, even areas that may have them? What are the benefits there? But also bringing the parks and the way that you guys go about doing it, really being sticklers for, the pure nature of, conserving the land, and, not just doing it for kind of, I don't know, commercial reasons or whatever, but really being dedicated to the intention of actually preserving that land. What are some of the other benefits of that, for the parks themselves, but also the communities that you're going into?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do, we take a look at these properties when we get them, and we do a series of assessments and say what could go here. And then we actually have community meetings. What does the community want to see there? So we say we have the intent of placing a park here. What would you like to see? We do that on a very regular basis, actually. And then we try to get friends groups involved. So friends groups to support, local businesses to support. But we kind of tell them we're not your typical park building organization. We're not. You may think that we're coming in with bulldozers when we show up to get ready to build one of these parks, but when you actually look at the impact in terms of square footage on the land, the number of trees that are disturbed, I mean, it's pretty minimal. It really is very minimal. These pathways are just wide enough for a four-wheeler to go down. Not that we allow that, but that's one of the tools that we use to build it. Mini skid steers come in, and they stay within the footprint of that trail. And the trails are built to mountain bike standards, and they're very good trails typically. One of our favorite builders and designers that we work with for our parks, he's an amazing trail builder. And as he builds, he hard packs the surface. And every bit of that trail, you may not notice it, is fine-tuned so that water runs off of it at just the right pace. It's enough slope to keep the water off so that it doesn't puddle and make mud puddles. So the last thing you want as a mountain biker is to splash through a whole bunch of puddles and destroy your trail. But it's not too steep, as it allows it to run off with a lot of erosion. So not just anybody can go out and build one of these trails. You have to have a lot of very specific training. So the impact and the techniques that we use are minimal impacts considering what we're doing on the land. And then after that, the trails typically shrink over time. So I said they're wide enough for a four-wheeler. Mountain bikes and people walking take up about this much space, a foot and a half, versus a 3-foot wide trail. So we allow natural vegetation to come back in on the sides of those trails. We allow leaf fall to stay in the wintertime. We don't blow them clean unless there's a real need for it for safety or erosion issues. So we're taking good care of the land. We try to be really good stewards of the land, and that's where my job comes in. So as the director of conservation, I go in and say, yeah, you can put the trail here. No, you can't put the trail there. I'll go in and flag trees. I'll put stakes in the ground and say, don't go within these stakes. There's a pretty cool plant there, or there's a nest here. We just finished up an actual habitat improvement project. But when you look at it from the outside, we were logging on one of our mountains because there were too many trees. Wow. And it was impacting the breeding habitat of the golden wing warbler. So we got funding and some really good forestry partners in there with us to say, okay, well, we need to cut out 45%, 50, 60% of the trees on these little blocks in your property, and it will, multiply almost 200 times the breeding habitat that you had on your mountainside. So it was kind of a no-brainer. The Fish and Wildlife Service was very instrumental in North Carolina forestry, and a lot of different organizations were involved in that. So, but we had to be off by a certain time. We had a hard deadline because the birds migrate from South America and they were going to be here any day that we were pushed up against it. So, we work, hopefully we would call it intelligently within what the natural world will allow us to. So we have the minimal impact. So we're very conscientious of what we're doing and how we do it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And talk a little bit about obviously there's competition, in any industry. And because you guys are so conscientious and doing things the right way, I'm curious about, are these lands that you're in competition with, maybe people who are for profit, people who wouldn't have that same care? Is it a situation that either an organization like yours does it the right way, or it could be a situation where these lands are in danger for people who wouldn't take that so much care?
I loved what I was doing as a professor. And one of the things that pulled me away was I had gotten to see over the years as a board member for this organization how they do it the right way. And one of the things that attracted me to it was I was kind of given that authority to say, if you don't think it's the right way, say no. Mm. So for us, to look at these projects, what makes us attractive with a lot of our partnerships and funding that we get is that we are very flexible as an organization. We're only a 2-person organization right now.
Wow.
We have 2 people, and then we have a couple of consultants that work with us on a part-time basis when we need them. We're very flexible, and we have the ability to step in and say, when people are like, well, we think this could be an important thing in the long term, but nobody else wants this property. We can go in and have those discussions about what that's going to look like, how much it's going to cost over time, and then say, you know what, I think we can fill a niche here that nobody else is filling. I mean, we took a property in Buckhead a few months ago. It was given to us right near Lenox Mall.
Oh, wow.
In a small neighborhood of homes. And the developers that gave it to us had been trying to build a house on it for 20 years. And the entire property was a wetland, the entire thing. And it had a stream going right through the middle of this 1-acre property. And we call those pocket parks because they're just pretty much useful for the neighborhoods that they're found in. But, the city had told them, no, you can't build there. And try as they might, they couldn't come up with any kind of engineering solutions that was bankable to build a house in a wetland. And so when I showed up on the property, the first thing I did was my jaw dropped because I said, wow, they were trying to build a house in a wetland. Right. And number 2, the entire property. I've never seen another property like this. And in all of my years, I don't think I can say that I ever saw a property like this. This entire property was covered in invasive species. If it was shorter than 20 feet tall, it was an invasive species. I found 2 plants that were native species, not just 2 species, and there were individuals all over. I found 2 plants on the entire 1 acre that were native species, that were little, that were supposed to be there. Everything else was invasive. Most of the shrubs, half the trees, Everything that was green on the ground and growing around was invasive. And so we actually partnered up with and hired a sheep shepherd. And he brought his sheep there. They're still there, I think. They should be going home any day now. But they've been there for almost 3 months, and they have been walloping the plants that don't belong on this property. And there were even baby sheep born on our property. The neighbors loved it. There was a dog there, so a sheepdog there, and he was protecting the herd or the flock. And the neighbors loved it because they were like, "Hey, there's somebody weird walking down the street because the dog is barking." Otherwise, he just chilled out, hanging out with the sheep, and they were doing their thing. So, we didn't go in and we didn't herbicide that property to death. We cut down a few shrubs and sprayed a little bit on the stumps, and that was it. So it was intelligent use of our resources and natural processes to help really get a foothold. Now we have kind of a blank canvas where we can say, hey, we're going to go try to plant some of these native species in here, and we can treat those non-native species, those invasive species, one at a time as they start popping back up. But it's not everybody's doing that. We've in the past we've had properties given to us and taken on properties where people would be like, that is just a crappy property. Why? Like, there is no conservation value there whatsoever. Well, 8-10 years down the road now, we've had the ability to go in and say, what we can do there, we can do a forest restoration project there. And there are matching grant funds and reimbursement funds depending on what you do. And so 2 of our major properties this season alone, the last couple of months, we've planted 200,000 longleaf pines, which were once the dominant tree in the southeast on the coastal plain. They lost probably 99% of their habitat. We cut most of them down and used them for lots of different things. They made really good ship's masts and really good pine logs for building. And we planted 100,000 in the last couple of months. So that's been a process. You have to get, that's a lot of land that's covered. That's almost 400 acres that we've covered in trees.
Wow. Well, I would say this: if it isn't your methods or isn't, the way you go about things, the fact that you brought real live sheep to Buckhead sets you guys apart.
I was worried about it. I really was. My boss said, well, let's try something different here. And so, we kind of got the ball rolling on that, and we met with the guy. And on the way there, I thought, oh man, these people are going to be so pissed. It's going to smell like a farm in the middle of their nice neighborhood here. And that was not the case at all. As a matter of fact, one of the neighbors' properties was absolutely covered in invasive species too, outside of his yard. His like immediate cared for yard. And we showed up that day and he walked outside, and the shepherd goes, well, this is only going to work well if we can go in your yard too. And we told the guy, yeah, we'll do this at no cost to you if you'll let us. And he was like, heck yeah, fence it in, throw those sheep in here. And he loved it. Absolutely loved it. So, it's a lot of what I do is communication, though, is just talking to people. You got an issue, you need an answer, you need a problem solved. You just got to pick up the phone and start asking the right people the right questions, and I found that it goes a long way. So
definitely. Well, let me ask you, I mean, obviously, you've described a lot of successful situations you've had, and the community seems very welcoming. What are some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing as you're trying to go out there and, like you said, do the right thing?
A lot of the challenges actually come down to miscommunications and people misunderstanding like what our organization has the capacity to do or what we will do. A lot of folks think, well, you're going to build a park. Well, they want to see a big grassy meadow and a playground.
Right.
And well, that big grassy meadow is all invasive species
Mm.
of grass. We're not going to come in and destroy perfectly good native habitats to do that kind of thing. And playgrounds are expensive. And actually, what I've discovered as part of my professional growth is that the insurance for playgrounds is insane.
Mm.
They're cost prohibitive for an organization like us. We can't always foot the bill for the insurance that would come with the cost of $100,000 playground. So for that, a lot of people get upset with us when they were like, well, you're a public park. Well, we're a privately owned, publicly open park. There's some differences there. We're not governmental.
Mm.
If you come in and start destroying our park, there's the possibility we can just shut it down. Unlike your neighborhood park that the government's running, they're probably not going to shut that thing down. Your elected officials are not that apt to pull the trigger on those kind of things, and we're not either, but we do operate differently in that regard. And we also don't have unlimited funding to take care of our parks. So we have to be very smart with, repairs and how we do maintenance and what we have to do maintenance on. So you have to be really smart about putting in different pieces that don't require a lot of maintenance. Recruiting volunteer help has been a massive challenge for us. We have some of the best volunteers on this planet. I would guarantee you that we do. And the best volunteers that we have, nobody knows that they exist, and they don't want anyone to know that they exist. I won't even mention their names on here because they prefer to just do what they do, go about life, and know that they've done a good thing for us. And they're always there when we need them. I can pick up my phone right now and call certain folks, but getting a lot of people involved has been a really big challenge. Some of our places.
Yeah, and I mean the fact you have such a dedicated group really speaks to the integrity and of your organization. I'm curious as we start to wind things down. When our audience was first introduced to you, obviously, like you said, you were a professor and you were kind of in that lane. And we talked a lot about your journey to get to that point. And, in speaking to the community and as we do, I know that a lot of people see that as the straightest line when you go through education and kind of what's out there. And I think a lot of people have a huge question of how do I go from going, say, the educational route to going into industry, whether it be profit or nonprofit. So I'd be remiss if I didn't come back and just ask you, having experience in the educational field and then deciding, like you said, to move over, what was that journey like? And, what are some tips you might be able to give people who are trying to make that decision or just even exploring those options?
Yeah. So the transition, I worked really hard on that transition, first and foremost, because, having been in higher ed for, close to 20 years,
right,
as a graduate student, an undergraduate, graduate, and then a professor, it's really ingrained in your identity. One of the things I've told folks, though, is that everything you do is skill building. And what I learned from all of my time in higher ed was that I had been acquiring the skills to do a lot of different things. I won't say that I could do whatever, but I had the skills to do a lot of different things. And I think I had a lot more skills than I gave myself credit for. And I think that's something you kind of get pigeonholed into in academia. So it was really helpful to me to have a couple of folks from the organization that I now wind up working for, to talk to me along the way. And it wasn't that when I got into working with this organization, it was about 5 or 6 years ago as a volunteer. I showed up to some meetings they had just built a new park. They wanted people involved. And I said, well, I'm happy to come talk to you guys. And it started off like, well, should we use herbicide or shouldn't we use herbicide? What does that do here? What are the problems? Should we do this? Should we do that? that's how I got involved over the years. And then one day I got a phone call and somebody said, well, hey, there's this other property we've got. And you were talking about this the other day. Do you know anybody that could talk to us about that? And I was like, well, I know about that. I can talk to you about that. And they're like, well, great. Can you meet us? Sure. So I went to that park. And then the next time I got a phone call, it was to go to somewhere else. So it started off as a volunteer thing. And I think getting out there and volunteering and being with organizations, being involved with organizations that are made up of people that are not from your background,
Mm.
you know, um, you start to really see that you have a lot of different skills that could be useful. And so after I'd done that a number of times, I was approached about being on the board. And so they were like, you've got a lot of knowledge that we could take advantage of if you'd be willing to share your time with us. And I said, sure, let's give it a run. And then after about a year and a half on the board, one day I got a phone call from the executive director, and we had a discussion that I loved what I did in education. And I had always wanted down that career path, but every so often I would try to venture off and get into the conservation realm.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very difficult field to veer off into. But the skills that I had, he said, I think I could use you. I think I could use you. And it's been a fantastic year. My job went completely 360. I mean, by basic training, I'm an aquatic biologist. I've been sitting here going through folders like this of forestry projects. I'm not a forester, so I'm becoming one. And if you were to come here and look at these books on the shelf, almost all the new ones are on how do I take care of grasslands, how do I restore grasslands and meadows, and how do I restore forests. I feel like I've had to go back to school in a lot of ways. And then the other thing that I had to learn how to do, which is like, if it's a weird hobby, I don't ever mention this hobby to people. I love to read law. I love law. I'm not a lawyer. I love law books. I used to read one every night before I go to bed on how to interpret law, and it was a law school book. And when I got into this job, like the very first week, we had a neighbor cut down trees on one of our properties. They thought it was their backyard, and it wasn't. It was our property. So I had to write a cease and desist letter. One of the very first weeks I was here. So, don't discredit what your hobbies are.
Mm.
You can, if you got weird hobbies like I do, they might come in handy. But yeah, that's been one of the biggest things, is just getting outside that comfort zone of, these are my blinders. This is where I'm going in academia. And, at some point I was like, oh, that looks fun. Let me try that. And let me go talk to these people. And along the way, somebody just had a thought that I might be good at something else as well. So
well, that's awesome. And we're excited to see what you're doing and what you're doing with your organization and the good things that are to come. So we got a couple minutes left. I wanted to leave you a little bit of time to, number one, once again, promote your organization, what you're doing, and any last minute advice you might have for anybody who would be interested in volunteering or working with you guys, or just in general, anybody in the STEM field that you'd like to get a message out to.
Yeah, so it's the Southeastern Trust for Parks and Land, and the website is stpal.org. And yeah, take a look at us. We're growing in leaps and bounds. Literally this week, I think we'll have 1 or 2 properties donated to us. And so what the future holds for those properties, we don't know yet. We've got a few ideas, but all of those properties are available to academic educational organizations for research, taking field trips, those kind of things. I mean, I'll meet you out there, walk you around those properties if you have a group of students, or if you have a community group that wants to take a look or wants to get out certain properties, just feel free to contact me. And as far as folks, particularly students, getting involved in this type of organization, don't underestimate the power of volunteer work. not just for people to volunteer with us, but just in your field. Don't underestimate the power of volunteer work. You're skill building. You may not believe it, you may not think it, but if you truly get involved in some of these organizations, it can open up all kinds of doors for you. So don't be afraid to go volunteer. That's how I got started. I think people used to tell me I was crazy for volunteering so much. I would just raise my hand and be like, I'll do that. Not sure. It's a challenge. I'm not 100% sure, but I can talk to some folks. That's how it got started for me, to get to this point. And who knows where I'll go next with it. It's we're growing by leaps and bounds. We're trying to take on more properties. We know that in the future we're going to have more help. And the other thing is something that kind of got stuck in my head years ago, and this is more for those students that are, going through college right now, trying to figure out, what do I do? What's important? I was very happy to get into, the theoretical philosophical sciences. Some people just don't have the patience or time for that. What I found now is that while I was doing that, other folks still in my cohort were taking a more applied approach. And that's exactly what I do now. So I'm back to learning about all those things that are applied that I just never took the time to do in the past. So literally learning hands-on chemistry, hands-on biology, and looking at big picture stuff. It's fun when you talk about it philosophically and theoretically in a classroom, but how do you go and actually do it and implement it? That's a whole different ballgame, whole different ballgame. And that's what's been fun and challenging so far. It's been a lot of fun, though. I've learned so much.
Yeah, and I think what we've learned from you in our 2 visits is that the journey is just beginning, and we hope to hear from you again. So maybe we'll kick off every season like this and see where you're at.
Awesome. I would love it. Absolutely love it.
Thanks for joining us once again, Keith, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Isaac. Anytime.
All right, man.